Hello, I'm back. And I've turned on yet another trippy thing to look at while I'm talking at you. Okay, so if you've studied apologetics and anti-apologetics enough, you've probably heard something similar to this at one point. Everything that began to exist has to have a cause. And if you know where I'm going with this, bear with me. And God never began to exist, so he has no cause. So I'm basically defining God I'm basically saying this, everything has to have a cause, which I'm not absolutely convinced of, but sure. As far as we know, everything has a cause. Everything that begins to exist has to have a cause, something that made it do something. But God doesn't have that. So we're going to start the argument with everything has to have a cause except God. So the first two sentences of the argument refute each other. You just say, oh, okay, well, that God can't fucking possibly exist then, because he never began to exist. But anyways, we'll go further on. God has no cause, and therefore he never began to exist, therefore he's always existed, and he's the one that caused the universe. Okay, fine. Well, if we're gonna go ahead and posit the existence of something that doesn't need to begin, then why can't the current state of the universe, which is matter and energy, be that thing? I mean, we're going to start the argument by saying everything needs to have a cause if it's going to start, and then we're going to immediately say, but this thing doesn't need a cause, and therefore this thing didn't have a start, and therefore it doesn't have a cause. So it's the ultimate starter, it's the ultimate initiator, it's the ultimate beginning, I guess you could say. But if we're going to go ahead and say that something can exist without a cause, then why don't we just go ahead and say the universe is the thing that exists without a cause? And the retort was, well, if matter and energy, this is the apologist trying to turn it back around and say, well, if we're going to say that matter and energy can always exist, then so can God. Okay, that's fine. But we're trying to explain to you that you can't have something that didn't start to exist, and B, even if you can have the thing that doesn't start to exist and doesn't have a cause, or that does start to exist and doesn't have a cause, then we can just say that thing is the current state of the universe, which is the matter and energy that make it up. And they try to turn it around and say, if matter and energy can always exist, then so can my God. Okay, fine. But we have the necessity of actually explaining the matter and energy, because that's the thing we can observe. If we could observe your God, sure. At that point, we could say, okay, this thing needs an explanation. Since the matter and the energy is the current composition of the universe, that's the thing that we gotta explain. Putting in an extra step violates the whole Occam's razor thing. We need to explain the current state of the universe, and that's matter and energy. And your attempt to explain the current state of the universe posits something that we haven't observed. We've observed the universe, we've observed matter, we've observed energy, we haven't observed your God, and yet you're trying to say that it's the ultimate cause. Well, why don't we go with the stuff that we can actually observe? before we start making up stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Any God that we would try to, and this is my stuff, so I don't know why I'm saying blah, blah, blah. But anyways, blah, blah, blah. Any God that we would attempt to insert as the explanation would have to be more complex than the universe itself, because it created the universe. It has to have the ability to actually create universes. And if we're going to do that, then we've just made the answer even more complex. To put a God in when we don't have a way to demonstrate his existence is just pushing back the answer. It's just pushing back the point at which we say, I don't know, one step past what we should have said. We don't know what the fucking why the universe started. We don't know. Doesn't mean that God is an answer, because even if God was the answer, we still don't know why. We still don't know how God, even if God is the answer, we'd still have to explain the mechanisms that he used to do it. I mean, how does he perform this universe creation technique of his? So even if God is responsible, that answer doesn't provide any additional information, and it's completely useless at that point. Because the whole point of coming up with a theory and an explanation is to give more detailed information, to give you a better understanding. And if your answer is more complex and less understood, it's not an answer. It's a complete non-answer. It's a placation. It's a way to be satisfied with not being able to know. Because like Ray Comfort, he knows. He absolutely knows. Sorry about that. We had camera problems. What is this fucking obsession with people? I mean, I absolutely know. I understand that people are uncomfortable with not knowing. But not knowing gives us the freedom to go explore and search for a correct answer. Putting God in there stops the point at which we're exploring, because we've got the answer already, except it's not really an answer. People are so desperate to say that they know that they're willing to accept a complete non-answer when they actually don't know. I don't fucking understand. I just don't fucking understand at all. If you're going to posit the God and you're going to be willing to say that God did all of it, and then we're going to ask, well, why did God do it? And you're willing to say, I don't know at that point. The only reason you're comfortable with saying, I don't know at that point, is because you've already injected your God, which you think is the ultimate answer. But it's not, because all you have to do is just trust in God and everything's going to turn out okay. Well, I don't think that trusting in God is going to make everything turn out okay. So forgive me if I don't believe that. But I don't understand. I mean, I do understand. It's uncomfortable to just not have an answer, to never really know exactly why or what happened. I understand how that's uncomfortable. But putting a God in there, like I said, doesn't give you a better explanation and doesn't increase your understanding. So it's not an answer. If it's more complex and less understood, then what's the point there's no explanatory power. There's no increase in understanding. If anything, you've just opened up more avenues that need to be questioned. Avenues that may not necessarily need to be questioned because there's no reason to posit that those avenues even exist. I gotta keep track of what time I'm at now, because now my video has been split in two and I'm going to have to recombine it later, which really pisses me off. But I guess that's about it. That's all I really have written about. I mean, I skipped over a bunch of it, but that's the basis of the whole argument is that sure, you could say that God is the fucking, that if matter and energy can be the things that always existed, well, you're just going to deny that and say that your God always existed. Fine. demonstrate that he's fucking there to have always existed. Because we can demonstrate the universe exists. That's the thing that needs explaining. Putting a God in there doesn't explain the universe, because then you need to explain God before you have the real explanation for the universe. So it's just it's a bridge gap. You have this hole in your information down here, and you're just gonna put a little gap over it. This is your God. It's not actually a gap, it's a chasm. You see how big this fucking thing is? You think by putting your God here, you're just sticking yourself a little bit further out there, and you're still gonna fall into the abyss of I don't fucking know at one point. But you really think this is gonna do something by inserting your God. This is the point where we should say we don't know. Okay? And this is the I don't know land down here. You fall into I don't knows right at this point. This is our knowledge. And when it meets I don't know, they fucking stop. But you seem to think that by extending this fucking thing here, by injecting this fucking God out here, that you're somehow gonna avoid the I don't know down here, which is fucking bullshit. It's a temporary measure, and there's no fucking point in it existing. Let's bring it back over here and be honest with ourselves and just say, well, we don't even know if the God is there tinkering with all this shit. I mean, you fucking Christians have no problem with your indoctrination filter of just saying, well, then, once evolution is proved to you, just say evolution was the mechanism, and the Big Bang was the mechanism, and the mechanism, and the mechanism. And then you can always just retreat to the position of, but God is the one using the, puppet strings to control all that stuff. So he's still the answer. Why can't you people just do that? I mean, if you're gonna desperately cling to this belief in a God, then at least retreat to the point where it's defensible. I was a deist for a long time because I felt like the position was more defensible than being a full-on dick hard Christian. So, let's try to, if you can't give up this belief in God, at least retreat to a position that's reasonable, that can be, you can at least say, well, I know that I can't demonstrate the existence of a God, and he really doesn't have, any demonstrable influence on the universe, and I choose to, believe in him anyway. And by the way, if you're going to say he has no demonstrable existence in the universe, he can't have possibly written a fucking holy book. So right there, we get rid of a lot of religious institutions which are unhealthy because of this thing called dogma. Dogma is the enemy. Dogma is the thing that I can't fucking stand. I can stand to be around a deist way more than I can stand to be around someone that has dogma on any issue. Any issue. If you've got dogma that says you have to do that, whether it's religious dogma or just dogma you've made up, like this is how I have to react in this situation at all times, that's fucking bullshit. You should always have the option of changing your mind. Changing your mind is brilliant. Ray Comfort hates that. Oh, you get new evidence and you change your mind. Would you have really been set? Would science have gotten us fucking anywhere if we had just, well, we found out the earth is this old, and despite any evidence that we ever find after this, we're just going to stick to that forever. That's the antithesis of science. That's not how science works. Alright, I'm going to let you go. Let me try to splice these two videos together. I will see you next time.